welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 143 with Markus Forderer, ASC BVK, DP of Constellation. Enjoy.
I used to be a magician. I still know some techniques, but I'm very reluctant on doing it. But do you have a magic connection or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I got my so yesterday, me and Larry Fong did a podcast.
Great magician.
He's so fun. And
I went to the Magic Castle actually the other day. A friend of mine was from Germany. He was performing for a week, so he invited me, and it was quite fun. Even if you understand the mindset, right? Usually you can see the next step coming. And there was this mentalist reading minds, and he picked me as a participant. And I'm so glad, because I would have not figured that one out. It was like I could read my wife's thoughts, and it was amazing. A really cool technique.
Yeah.
I feel like filmmaking and magic is so much in common, right? It's all about directing, like especially cinematography, right? You're directing the viewer's attention and eye in a certain spot on the screen, or misdirecting it, depending.
Yeah.
Show, right?
Well, that was something me and Larry were talking about, was like, specifically the Magic Castle is like the only place in the world, at least in the US, I haven't really left, where like people willingly go to watch vaudeville and you know, like suspend, like people go to movies so critically, but when you go to the Magic Castle for whatever reason, you're like, yep, I'm a child again, just, you know, disbelief gone.
And it's so fun that it's actually across the street from the ASC clubhouse.
I know.
Like, where am I going tonight? Like,
you pick whichever parking's cheaper.
Yeah. That's really fascinating, the magic and filmmaking, and that the early filmmakers were kind of magicians, right? Like Méliès, and there's so much overlap.
Yeah. I still think, I've been trying to, this was something I was going to ask Larry about, but then we ended up just going on a roll. But like, what are some of those things that you think you've been able to use as a cinematographer that might be tenets of magic? Because I think an easy one is just like Larry had actually mentioned the Texas switch is like the most classic.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a couple others, you know, Pepper's Ghost. Maybe.
Actually, like one of my early films, it's called I Origins. There was this accident scene where one of the characters gets split in half by an elevator. And you know, when you're in these production meetings, you think about technology, technique, and like the visual effects people always like, let's put green stockings and make it a visual effects. And I knew the way we want to shoot it, handheld and verite, and should feel right. Like I said, like there's a way, like David Copperfield has this illusion where he's split in half by a laser, right? Like we could, and I explained to the director, if we pull this off, right, we're going to be a bit limited with the camera angles, but it's going to feel so much more authentic, and that's what we did. And I think producers back then thought like, I'm crazy. What is this guy doing here? But it worked out nicely, and it's so intense because it can rack focus, which we would have never been able to do with, it was a green screen effect.
Right.
So yeah, we used that technique and all kinds of like floating, like actually coming to Constellation, like zero gravity. There's, you know, like magicians know ways to make stuff float. So that's always interesting in production meetings when you bring up unconventional techniques, right? That's realm.
I remember, whose was it? I think Chris Angel had like a levitation that was really famous on TV, and he released it on DVD, and I got that DVD, and the technique, because he could levitate like, you know, a couple feet onto stuff. Yeah. And I was just like, I have not a clue. And then you learn what it is, and you're like, see, magicians at the height of what they do are so clever and don't think about boundaries, literal or otherwise. And I often wish I could unlock that mindset quickly, you know.
It's such a specific mindset, right? You're absolutely right. And I always try to bring that into filmmaking, because I think a couple of years ago, when it was still more practical effects and miniatures, people would find solutions for any kinds of challenges, right? Like, and think outside the box. Now, quite often you read something in the script, you discuss it with the team, and like, oh, this is going to be a good effect. So people think it's going to be done in a computer, right? Because nobody knows immediately has a solution for it. But like that magician's mindset, right? You tackle a problem, and find a solution that's not very obvious, but usually very clever, right? That's why.
Yeah. I gotta come up with better questions about that, because I've been thinking about that for a long time. Because I think there's a lot of, like you said, some of the original filmmakers are magicians, but a lot of DPs either had interest in it's either magic or architecture. I have found seem to be like the two side hobbies.
Interesting. Yeah, more to magic and movies.
Yeah. Well, do you normally I ask this at the beginning, but have you been watching anything cool recently?
Garbage question. I mean, I've watched Dune 2 a couple times. And I'm in prep on something new, so I'm watching all kinds of cartoons from the 80s.
Oh, nice.
But I can't name any specific ones.
Sure. I had seen in a couple interviews, you're a pretty big Greg Fraser fan.
Yeah. He's amazing, right? Like especially Dune 2 is like, I'm so much into lenses, and like what he pulled off with like layers and embracing, right? At this, like when you look at the original material, like, or somebody riding a sandworm, visually this could look like cheesy, right? Like, but they,
like in the first one, or like the original.
The original, they pulled it off like so tastefully, right? And it feels analog, it feels captured by a human with a camera, right? It's not this trap on some of the big productions, is that you end up on a big techno crane and do this smooth, sweeping, perfect, glossy shots, but this felt textured, and just, he's a brilliant artist and a great mind, right? Like also he has an engineering mindset, and always eager to embrace new technologies.
Yeah, like there's certain DPs who seem to really like understand realism. I don't know how better to say that, which does not make me a good interviewer. But like the idea that certain films, they'll be like, for instance, I know you guys talked to Scott Kelly about the space stuff, right? Because you want it to look real. Some people, you'll watch a space movie and it's just like snap zooms and flying around. It's like, or certain like monster movies, the camera's like helicoptering around and it could either be on a helicopter or it could just be a 3D animation that no human would ever do. And it does, in my opinion, affect the audience's perception of the material.
Definitely. Yeah, that's right early on in pre-production. I watched some other references, and of course, gravity had such an impact, right, on shooting space. But it's this perfect, amazing, brilliantly done one-ers and complex moves. But I felt like I never felt at home with this kind of mindset, and that's why actually this conversation with Scott Kelly were so influential. He gave me access to some of the private videos he shot on the ISS, and I kept asking, like, I was always fascinated, how do astronauts film themselves, let's say in their off time, right? They're recording stuff for their memory or geeking out, or they document, obviously, the experiments they shoot. And I felt like this is the way to approach this, like as if our cameras, we're one of those crew members, we're floating in zero gravity, how would you shoot? And people always assume in zero gravity it would be super smooth, but it's actually not the case, because you're hand holding a camera, and there's usually no resistance yet. Oh,
what?
I created fireworks. How did I do that? What's happening?
All right. I need to talk to the Zoom people, because that is not, I've never seen the fireworks, but
I don't imagine, I didn't even know that's possible. So basically when you're free floating, like that's how he explained it to me, with a camera, and they film themselves sometimes, there's no point of contact sometimes, right? So there's a lot of wibble, you feel your heartbeat. So what he sometimes did to get the perfect shot is he takes his iPhone, just gives it a little push, so it really free floats, and then you follow it. It's almost like a Steadicam gimbal where you're not allowed to touch it because it would shake it. So you barely maneuver it. And I thought, this is so fascinating. And I watched a lot of references with my camera operators, and that's what we went for. Actually, basically handheld in space. That's how we tried to capture this following Numi, or like Joe's character, wherever she goes. But so it feels not shot by a machine, right? Not by a crane or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I guess I never thought about that because I would have thought the same thing, that they could just free float. But I guess scientifically, they're not floating, they're falling. So, if you imagine jumping out of a plane and let it go, that's what's going on. But like, also, when you have a small camera, what do? You put a bunch of weight on it so that those little micro jitters go away. But you can't do that.
Like mass, right? There's in zero gravity. That's so interesting. There's no weight, but there's still mass. And holding something in your hand, like a small iPhone, that still moves. Even if I would be floating right now, it still moves relative unless you really let it go. So that's what we actually did. We had our stunt coordinator, Martin. He was brilliant. And we came up with rigs to float like him, giving him a Ronin gimbal, and then we could remotely operate it. And with some of the more complex stuff, like we flew him on wires. Because the whole set is it's an amazing set. Andy Nicholson, our production designer, he's like an ISS expert. Like he worked on Gravity and was nominated for an Academy Award for his set. But
good team member to have.
He really could build the ISS like to scale. Like we built it in sections, but to scale, like super authentic. He had all this research. So the floors are not meant to be walked on, right? They're like meant for zero gravity, and because they replicated it so authentically, it was very fragile. It would be like electronic panels on the floor and like shelves and all kinds of stuff. So it's like, you guys got to float through with a crane. I was like, no, we don't want to shoot with a crane. We want this handheld feel. So that's why we sometimes suspended operators, or used like all kinds of techniques, like very smooth handheld, sometimes Steadicam, gimbals. And it was really, I think that was one of the most challenging things to shoot, was that ISS set. But I think I was always fighting to keep the set intact. Like usually in big films, you pull a wall to stick your crane in, and like that you get this sense of claustrophobic sensation that she must go through, right? Being alone in this, even if it's quite a big station, it's still a very confined space. And I'm super claustrophobic, so I'm really leaning into how can I visually express my personal sense of claustrophobia. Like, and you lock yourself into like a Soyuz capsule. I could never do that.
How do you make something like the ISS? Because I've seen footage of it. Obviously, we all have. How do you make the set look appropriate for the film? I was going to say cool, but because the real one is everything's just white and bright because it's a science station. That's for seeing shit, not for contrast. So how do you keep that looking realistic while still kind of staying true to the ISS? Or
that's a good fine balance. Like in research, there's always real references, and nowadays with on YouTube, there's like amazing 4K, and like NASA is amazing what they're sharing now, 4K high res flight through the ISS, or we did it also with VR goggles. You see it during day and night. Especially I was trying to find night footage because there's rarely, usually all we see is the bright white. That's especially when they do like a live broadcast, they make sure it's very bright, right? So you see everything.
Right.
How can we find mood? And it's also scary at times, right? So it can be super bright. So we obviously started with building all the lighting in the set, so it all feels like it comes from there, but it's all controlled obviously from a dimmer board. So you can do like flicker effects or turn off certain lights to shape the face. And it's also with Scott, it was amazing to have him on set. So he was there for most of the ISS shoot. And he would say like, yeah, this looks pretty believable. I mean, it's a bit dark. It's darker than I remember it, but sometimes, especially in our story, right? She's fighting the clock. She's running out of power. So every time the ISS goes into the night side of the Earth, there's no solar power.
Right.
That was quite fun to play with that, having power come off and on. But it's always the struggle, right? How do you make something? It's clearly a story. I feel like as an audience member, when I watch a film or a great show, if it looks one-to-one like a documentary or like real life, right? There's something fun finding a cinematic heightened version that you buy into, hopefully, that feels grounded. And it's sometimes hard to say what's a matter of taste, what's too much. But so we shot with anamorphic lenses. That's already very different how our eye sees. And and controlled lighting. And but I think especially for this, with the Cal, like the science experiment being, I feel like there has to be some presence, even if you don't see it, or that there's something going wrong, because there's so many scenes later on Earth which are like two people talking on their kitchen table, basically.
Right.
How do we find a presence of this something larger than life going on, right? Which is causing some of this interference. And that's where I think the anamorphic lenses came in, but also some of the lighting choices. And I was actually inspired by by the Northern Lights when we went scouting for all the Sweden scenes. They actually shot in Finland, which is right across the border. It looks identical. It's a beautiful landscape, and we went there scouting, and I saw the Northern Lights for the first time. It's like unbelievable, right? And how can you capture this? It's almost impossible. It was 24 frames. All we know online or Instagram, this amazing, super jacked up images. They're like long exposures and everything cranked up in Photoshop. So by eye, it's way more subtle. Did you ever see the Northern Lights?
No, it's something I've actually always wanted to do.
Yeah. It's really amazing at first, like, because it's so dim and you look up and you think like, am I making this up? Is it really, when you're waiting so long, you hope for it to happen. And like, I think I'm seeing it or not. It's like a bioluminescent, sometimes I saw once bioluminescent waves and you look out in the
That's
ocean.
the other one I really want to see.
And we're like, is it really happening? I think I see it. But when it really happens to you, there's no more question. Like oh my God, this is it. It's like the universe falls on top of your head. And so this cyan, blue, green light, that was kind of something we carried through different scenes to give a sense of that greater presence of something.
Yeah.
Like that mystery, even if it's not in the frame.
My nerdy ass would have brought my color meter and waited for it to get real bright and then just be like, what is it? You know?
What is it? I think it's a way to dim, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Color meter, yeah. But yeah, we shot some real plates which we could use, and that's amazing. And we like some crazy lighting rig. And that was the big thing in these cabin scenes, the exterior by the lake, right? It's the real snow. Like we shot some of the interiors on a soundstage, but the exteriors, it's all shot on location on a real frozen lake in a very remote northern area. And like, how do you light that, right? Like you cannot, like with corners and backlight, like it would all look artificial or feel like a street lamp, no matter how big you go on such a scope. So I figured we have to do day for night, but then there's in that area, the sun, at that time of the year, the sun never comes over the horizon. So you get this long blue hour.
Oh, interesting.
But when the sun is gone, it's pitch black. You cannot imagine, because there is no other cities or anything around, and the sun, like with the shifted Earth, it's really black. So I knew with that couple of hours of blue hour, like a regular blue hour and magic hour lasts like 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Usually up there, it lasts, if you're lucky, a couple of hours, which is very luxurious. But I knew we had to extend that with working with like children and complex stunts. Right. So we built this massive moon box that lights up thin air, something I've never done before, like we experimented with. And it was an interesting conversation with producers, like, what do you want to put that X amount of lights in a tower and light up the air? Like, because I didn't want to light the set or the actors, because it would have felt lit. So we had like a scissor lift behind our main set. We could shoot up, and then it would light on top of, like, shoot out very strong focused beams of LED lights in all directions.
Got it.
It would be above the frame line, and then we had snow and slight fog. So there was a slight layer of haze and snow off frame that gave you this super gentle, soft top light for miles. It was really magical. And then we could, for scenes where we wanted to give the present for the Northern Lights, we could run some slight animation, because all LED lights,
right,
they fanned out. That was quite a fun thing to play with, but also risky. Like, I think it's never been done before like this. And like, I put everything on this one card, as in like, let's go with this one corner, because there's no way, like I said, to hide, like, you need, in every direction, we need like 5-6 different contours, and put it out in a frozen lake. It's super complicated. And
right.
So I said, let's go very simple and try something new.
So instead, they're not, what light fixtures were they? Were they like COB, just
It was Vortex 8.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So they're like, I think 12-degree focus speed. They're very fairly focused.
Yeah. I got a Vortex 4 back here.
Nice.
I love that one.
We needed color control because we knew we would start in the true blue hour where it's very, very blue. And then as it gets darker, we gently, every couple of minutes, my gaffer would measure and we would adjust to keep the level consistent. So we had to adjust not just brightness, but also color temperature because it shifted dramatically. So with a traditional HMI, so something this would have not, an HMI would have looked like the warmest golden sunlight in comparison to that blue sky.
Yeah. So you had all the vortexes essentially in a square aiming out, but not down?
Yeah, all out, straight out into the horizon.
And how big was it? Like how many units?
That's a big, that's big. I think maybe 60 units.
60?
Yeah.
Damn, that is big.
Yeah, we had them in 2 rows to get the power we needed. Now it's exciting now with technology, right? Like NAB coming, and there's still LED technology. They're getting brighter and brighter. At that point in time, it was the brightest that's reliable at that temperature because we knew it would get really cold. There was also like quite a challenge. Our production was amazing. They rented a cold truck for 1 week while we were still shooting. We were based in Berlin, like there's like Studio Babelsberg. We shot all the space stuff there. And so for 1 week, we had a cold truck in front of the set, and every department could bring their gear to test it, how it would handle that cold. So the sound guys would bring in their mics, the props would test their props, and at some point the camera department was scheduled, and the lighting department, we brought our lights or lenses and cameras. And some of the lights, for example, wouldn't work at a temperature. We had to swap them out, but the vortexes worked great. And the cameras and lenses, we had little heating blankets you put on the lens to keep them
like the hand warmers?
Something like this. It's something custom that makes. You plug it into the camera that slightly keeps it just. Otherwise, the fluids to keep the mechanics working would get so stiff that you could not pull focus anymore.
Right.
But we tested this all, and it was actually worked quite well.
Yeah. What gear doesn't work at that temperature?
There's some LED lights, some, let's say, lower cost LED lights that didn't work. I don't want to name them, but
gotcha. Yeah.
And all like battery life, right? It's really challenging for the camera department. We had like cooling boxes with the batteries, and then there's heating pads in those boxes to keep them warm. Like I think like these hand warmers, the chemical hand warmers.
Right.
Just throw a couple in there. That helps already. Otherwise, if you walk around with a bare brick battery, by the time you go on the camera, you lost like half of your capacity. Like
that's something I wouldn't necessarily have thought of. Like,
yeah.
Not the batteries thing, but just like having to put everything in an insulated box just to try to get 10 minutes out of something.
Fun, but it was so worth it. Like the Michelle McLaren, our director, she was always pushing, let's go there for real and not fake it with blue screen, right? To show the scope, and that was the pressure on me, and knowing she wants to see the scope, but how do we show that depth at night? Like most of the scenes are like all in episode 1 and 2, which I shot, are night scenes. If you would shoot a true night, you could also go on a soundstage and shoot in front of Black Duvetine, right? And at a couple of fake trees or something. But so that's why that day for night was so crucial. And it's like, as a cinematographer, it's very stressful. You feel the light levels going down, everybody, especially in this temperatures, like maybe somebody has to go to the bathroom or you discuss something or a hair fix, you have to be on your A game, and everybody has to work fast and to maximize the real magic hour.
Yeah. I actually had seen in a different interview that you were talking about the importance of keeping technology invisible for the actors. And I was wondering if you could expand on that, but also in a situation where there's so many technical considerations because of the weather, did you have to compromise in that goal, or were you able to find solutions to make sure that idea stuck around?
I think this is so important. I learned this from a filmmaker I worked with early on, like Mike Cahill, who's comes from documentary, and that really shaped my whole mindset of because there's so much, we know, like as filmmakers, there's so much gear and technology that you can bring on a set to shape a shot. But then first of all, you lock yourself in, and you don't have, not just the actors have no flexibility where to go, but also you can't pan your camera when there's a light stand or some flag standing in the room, right? So always try to keep the technology as invisible as possible. And that's also how this moon rig came up, because it's a scissor rig, goes straight up behind the house. The actors would not even notice, and it just gives this gentle glow, and we could shoot 360. Even weirdly, it's like right, as a filmmaker, maybe you don't want to avoid front light, but we're front lighting the air, but then it kicks back, like all these snow and ice crystals in the air, they kick backwards at the subject. So then it becomes this ominous glow. And the same with we didn't bring any cranes or dollies. We went to northern Finland. There was this big exterior scenes, and then we went to Morocco for the landing site. There too, we said let's shoot it all handheld, Steadicam, very small, and then we utilized drones as much as possible.
Right.
There's this new Red Inspire 3 drone. We had the first one before it came out. We had amazing drone pilots, Ferdinand. Dynamic is the drone team, and this thing is like a game changer. We didn't bring any, even for visual effects plates where you have to lock off a camera and maybe shoot a 360 tile or something. We would just hover this thing at 4 feet and it would not move no matter how strong the wind. It's like GPS stabilized somehow. It
Oh wow.
knows exactly where it is and stays there, or you can program a path and repeat the path. It's like a motion control system in the air. That's really amazing.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't really gotten into it because, obviously you need a pilot's license now and everything. So and also anytime I've ever used it, you get a client, I don't do a lot of narrative right now, but you get a client who's oh, we want to do a drone here. And then it ends up just being an establishing shot. You jack it up 30 feet, you shoot a building or whatever, and you're that's it. I'm so happy we did that.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? If you go traditionally with a heavy lifter drone, right, to fly a cinema camera and your big lenses, the effort it takes, safety and cost and the time, and you have to calibrate focus, and it is, then you want to fly maybe at golden hour or magic hour and the window is so tight. That's why this new drone technology is a game changer. It's all built in. It's one system, right? A camera, lens, talk to each other. You pop on a battery and you fly up in no time, and the flight time is amazing. And we, again, in northern Finland, we flew at such extreme temperatures, chasing. There's this opening sequence in episode 1 when Numi's character, she's driving through that snow landscape, and we would have gotten a helicopter for something like this, but we used a drone. We could fly, the signal strength is amazing. We could fly forever, but then because it was so cold and at that high altitude where the drone is flying, slowly the drone would start freezing mid-air, but it created the best image ever. It was little ice crystals formed on the front lens. It looked like the best diffusion filter I've ever seen. You
nice.
could not make something like this. Yeah, there's sometimes fun, happy accidents, which I think it's so many people try to control and plan filmmaking, right, in a way as good as you can, but it's so important, I think, to be open for happy accidents, the drone team, oh my God, we have to bring the drone down and wipe off that lens. I said, no, this is the best thing I've ever seen. Keep shooting, right? It's because those lenses are usually very sharp, and our main lenses were Panavision T-series anamorphics, a bit softer.
Those are nice.
So this was the frozen lens was the perfect complement for the anamorphic lens.
You'll have to hit up Schneider or someone and be we need to figure out how to replicate this.
Yeah, the ice crystal.
The Forderer frost.
The Forderer frost.
Tell me if this is what you're talking about with the ice and air, because one of the most kind of semi-magical experience I've ever had was I think it was in Steamboat, Colorado, and I was snowboarding. It was really early in the morning, and the air had there was snow floating in the air. It wasn't falling. It was just there. And then the sun would hit it and you'd get the full sundog, or, the big circular thing. And I tried to take pictures. I had a film camera on me, tried my phone, I couldn't photograph what my eyes were seeing. And I just had to explain it to people. I'm well, you're going to have to go some of these mountains at the right time and just.
So was it some halo effect, basically?
Yeah. Off the sun itself. I could send you a photo if I could find it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so into lenses and flares and.
Well, you got the database now, don't you?
Yeah, the database. I have heard of it. Yeah. So
I'm a member. I'm in the beta.
Nice. Awesome. So NAB is gonna go live. The big thing.
Wonderful.
With like hundreds of lenses. The never-ending story. Every time some filmmakers, they pick a set of lenses and they want to shoot entire life with that set of lenses. I'm the opposite. I feel like after one project, like I get very excited in pre-production. We find a set of lenses we want to shoot with. They have certain characteristics. But then on a film or like a show like Constellation, we shoot for so long, and every day you see the same style, right? Like, so I get kind of fatigued. So for the next project, I try to find something completely new. And I always feel like when you look at camera assistants or like filmmakers and just testing lenses and with a flashlight in the test room, it's for flares and stuff. It's so hard to judge a lens unless you compare it side by side to something. And that's how this whole thing came up. We have to shoot this with motion control so you can really see it side by side. And I feel also the flare, I mean, lens flares are a bit maybe overused by some and can be distracting, but I think the flare, when you flare a lens, it immediately shows its character, right? They can tell, even if I want to use a lens for a scenario that I don't want to show any lens flares, but in a test, if I shine a light in, like basically just pure light into a lens, you see how it reacts. Is it very neutral or clean or funky, low contrast, viewing glare, all that stuff. So even without seeing a face or shooting any test shots, you can get a good sense. I always feel like it flares like the fingerprint of a lens, like it reveals its DNA, right? I'm very philosophical about it. But so there's a never-ending story, and we live in a day and age, right, where almost every other week there's new lenses coming out of the market, right, being rehoused vintage lenses or new anamorphic lenses, all these companies from Asia. Yeah. It's a really exciting time to pick the right tool for the project.
Yeah, because I assume you're kind of the same mind as me, is that aside from workflow stuff, most cameras are a good choice.
Yeah.
But the lenses are always going to be more fun, I guess.
I think, right, if you, at this point in time, if you expose properly most like good, decent high-end cinema cameras, they're pretty much the same. Like, or you can do stuff upgrading the lenses. Are you into vintage lenses or?
Oh yeah, my secret for the longest time, before China started kicking out like all these lenses and people started becoming more aware of it, my secret was my set of Nikon AIS lenses, because they weren't as, they're so good, and they obviously aren't as like fudgy as the K35s, but they still have a bit of that character, and so I still use those things if it's people are looking for something. They feel more like, I love the Sigma Cine lenses, but they're so neutral.
Yeah.
So anytime the fall off on some of them is really nice too, but anytime that needs something a little extra, even though sometimes it's a little harder to, because they're manual, I use those.
Yeah. The Nikons are, not many people have them on their radar, but they have interesting characteristics. And now I'm actually wondering with all like Red and Nikon merging, if actually people will pay more attention to that kind of glass. And
maybe. I'm actually excited to see if Nikon ends up putting the Z mount on because I know people are like, but I already have all these RF lenses. I'm like, no, it's a shorter. You can if you use Z mount, you can put anything on there.
Yeah,
so that'll probably be good.
That's exciting times, right? Even like I remember when I started filmmaking, where I was an intern at a camera rental house at Airy years ago in Munich. And when you only had like professional PL lenses, and they were really hard to get, and people back then tried to adapt, right, long Canon on Nikon lenses for PL, but now you can go on eBay, like as a young filmmaker or even experienced filmmakers like me too, you go on eBay and you find some really rare or unusual thing, and maybe it's $50 and you order it and play with it and think, oh my God, this has such interesting characteristics, so much more interesting than most modern cine lenses made, right? For 10 times of the price. Like, of course, the mechanics and stuff is not as reliable to shoot on a maybe $100 million project or something like that. But the fact that you can shoot a high quality image, I always say like to young filmmakers, right, when you're starting, and like we all work with the same tools. Like if you do a big, like I say, $100 million feature, for example, or a little student film, at the end of the day, you're gonna have a close-up with an actor, somebody sitting in front of a white wall. You're dealing with the same problems. Yes, you have some other challenges and maybe more resources for some stuff, but the basics that really tell the story, the performance of the actor in those close-ups, it's all the same. We all cook with water. Like you just have to be creative and make the best with the tools you have, and find something that you respond to, right? Like that's always important. Not try to do something that you've seen other people do, and it's so interesting, right? This whole conversation with generative AI or like all the people referencing, like even, I think it's super fascinating shot deck. I use it myself, and people referencing other work in a way all the time. Like the older I get, the more, like in my early days, I would look at other films and screenshot stuff that I reference almost nothing. I go purely off the script and like intuition and in discussion with the director, and you find hopefully your own language and voice. Like it's dangerous to rehash what's been done before, because that's what AI really is going to be great at.
Right. Yeah, just
original.
I had some AI conversations with Jay Holben and Michael Keone, who does Strata. He used to work at he started Light Iron and shit.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I had those interviews back to back, and it was interesting to hear how Jay was like all in.
Mm-hmm.
He's for it, and I am not. I'm on the team that's like that needs to be. I don't know if I'm being overreactive, but it's like why are these tech dudes spending so much time trying to automate creativity when I thought we were supposed to automate tedium.
Yeah.
Which is more Michael's thing with Strata. He's like, why are there's a bunch of busy work that people don't need to do. Like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
And raising the amount of time you spend being creative. Yeah. The idea of type, because I've heard people say like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could just type in like, oh, Jurassic Park, but with Brad Pitt? And I'm like, no, I don't want that. Like, I want to see someone else's point of view. I don't want to see my, it could be a useful tool, but it's kind of early still.
It's fascinating. Still, especially in filmmaking and in bigger projects, there is so many things that seem complex and complicated just because they're on a bigger scale. If you work as like a one-man band, you can do a lot of your effects yourself, but when you work on a sequence which has a couple hundred visual effect shots, then a visual effect shot is very complicated and expensive, and sometimes then not even possible. And then it seems tempting, right, that you just prompt and say, replace the background, add snow, and there it is.
Right.
But we all know at this point in time, at least, right, is you can create some snow in one shot. In the next shot, the snow will look very different, and it might not cut, right? But I'm sure this is gonna get solved. But I totally agree, right? I also thought, if I imagine the far future, so much going to be automated, and maybe most of humanity will be like artists for making music and art. And that's how you.
That's what I was promised from popular science back in the day.
That's what, but then again, like maybe it's you have to see it as the tool. We make art with the help of, if we choose to, right, with the help of assisting tools.
Yeah, see the stuff like that. But like, for instance, machine learning being able to roto things quickly.
Yeah.
Select subject, awesome.
Yeah.
Like, no one likes to roto.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the roto artists should have their pay cut because their job is easier, for instance, something dumb like that. Like, I just constantly think that the commerce side is going to interrupt. I have this weird theory that like anyone who's not in a creative field wants to punish artists because they're not playing the same game, right? Capitalism in general is just a game we all agreed to play, it's not really, we didn't agree, but you're born into it and you either agree or you do something illegal. And everyone who doesn't play that game makes other people frustrated. There are rules, and then some people don't like rules. Most creatives don't like rules.
Don't like rules.
Magicians don't like rules.
Don't like rules. I mean, we'll see. It's not, right, we're not going to stop that development, and it's going to, maybe, like I said, make the tedious stuff easier and quicker, and maybe we're getting more done in less time. That would be the ideal, right? But of course, the system will maybe squeeze it that we're just doing more and still work the same amount of time, and you output more. But again, I feel like we humans, we're so trained to seeing. I just saw a video the other day with some famous actor explaining how large language models work. And it was all done with an AI actor. Now, weirdly, I cannot even remember the name of the actor they used, because it was, you could feel it was at first dancing, oh my God, this is so authentic. But then you see the little thing. We are so trained to the human nuances. And I think we want to see, right, it's a cultural thing. We want to see real people doing real stuff.
Right.
Like, and even that's why I think these are flagship projects, like when Christopher Nolan shoots on IMAX film, it is a proof this was not Reddit. They don't even want to scan the negative to edit visual effects. That's why they're using sometimes a cardboard background, extra stuff, like to get it in camera. And I think audiences respond to this. Of course, there will be maybe a big market where stuff gets done cheap and doesn't really matter. But I think in general, culturally, we embrace that, and we want to, I think hopefully people want to pay for it to see something real, like, and see a TV show with real actors, and they were shot on real locations.
Yeah.
Because over time, I think it will be generic, right? Like they all learned from this, models learn from what's out there, so you can mash up stuff. And it's also, it's replicating our brain. We obviously also only learned from what we've seen and make up stuff in that process. But
see, that's the thing. I've heard that argument from people who say like, oh, it's no different than, a person taking influences and, oh, I love this shot here in shot deck, I'm going to use that for my movie. But the difference, in my opinion, is that the AI models currently try to replicate a one-to-one example of whatever you feed it, more or less. This is inarticulate, but you and I can look at an image and both key on to something different that we like. And if I have like a whole set of maybe like 5 movies that I'm stealing from, I might pick 5 different things that those DPs did that interest me than you would. And I think that's the main difference. There's a dirtiness to it that makes it human.
That's again the interesting thing, right? Like especially in like cinematography, right? It's an art form. You want to go, you read a script and you have an imagination. Like I said, 5 people would have 5 different versions in their head. But I was trying to go against the obvious, like, yeah, you could light this bright and show and like this. What makes it interesting? And the weird thing again is that these AIs learned from great artists who think like that too, right? The AI might not understand, but it's just able with a formula to replicate great art. That's a fascinating shit. But I mean,
like, so, one thing that was brought up was just like, especially for younger creators or indie people, like having, pre-production is probably the most important step in any film, but you might not have the ability or funds or network to hire a storyboard artist.
Yeah.
So being able to type those in and get a visual and then maybe mark it up, yourself. So, I'd rather do that. That could be beneficial, but it's not necessarily putting that storyboard artist out of a job. It's that person couldn't get one anyway.
Yeah.
So there is.
Or it could be, ideally, it would be used by storyboard artists to be more productive or more refined. To just do a couple scribbles and say, give me 5 more shots in that style, stuff like this, right? But then again, it's only a matter of time that somebody says, now make this storyboard look photoreal in a still and now animate that sequence.
Right. Have them say
then again, there's, right, like what is photography? Like it's really, we're capturing photons in a real scenario. That's why I think it has been animated film forever and also visual effects. Like, that's why sometimes people are getting very worried about AI and stuff, but visual effects are around for a long time. And in the beginning, people thought too, like, oh, we might not be able to differentiate this building exploding here, was this real or fake? And usually we can tell, right? And now it's getting maybe more accessible, cheaper, and super fast. But fundamentally, we could also replicate actors, right? Like they tried it in Star Wars for a couple of shots, with bad actors that are not allowed around anymore with traditional visual effects. It just makes it easier, cheaper. That's why maybe the danger is for news and what that means for society. But I think for artists and filmmakers, like we're capturing, telling stories, and I think I totally believe in humanity in that way, that we're a tribal group, right? We want to sit around the fireplace and tell each other stories. We want to hear a story from a really human, and value it even more. Like that's why I think people like Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve, or like they get such a standing because they're great artists and do something unique, and hopefully everyone as a filmmaker we push ourselves. Like the same with like working with Michelle McLaren on this show. Like she's like, it was the first time we worked together, and we're almost neighbors, but we never met. And she worked on every big show there is, like unbelievable, from starting from the X-Files to like Better Call Saul and everything. And that experience, again, like being trained on seeing these different genres, but then clashing in a way. Like with me, I come from a very maybe different background. I usually shoot feature films, and I was treated like, even if it's a TV show, like which has the 8 episodes, but I treated like a mini feature, right? Like, and we had obviously this. I only shot the first 2 episodes with Michelle, and there's 2 other fantastic DPs like Frank Lam and Yaron Scharf, and we all collaborated, and everybody made their own version of it. Like I totally embraced it and told them to like here are a couple of things we established. These are the lenses, cameras, and kind of certain things we pre-lit on locations already, but as I make it your own, and I think that's the fun actually in a TV show, especially if you watch it as a regular audience member, you're not so familiar with filmmaking techniques. You might feel it's a little different, right? You might not be able to put your finger on it, but that makes it hopefully richer than this, let's say, like a one-dimensional perspective from one person.
Yeah, absolutely. That does kind of bring up, when you're talking about Michelle's experience and your experience shooting features, like some I kind of enjoy asking people of your caliber is like, what, when you're on your $100 million film, your Red Notice, your Independence Day, whatever, or this show also looks very high budget, but you got stars in there, whatever. What are some of the things that outside of the color grade make it look high quality, like make it look like a film to you? Because I experienced this, I asked someone else, but like I was second unit on a feature, and a real one finally, and it was just literally an Alexa with Atlas anamorphics, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't even, it was second unit, so I barely even had a lighting hit, and I just shot it, and then I see it in the theater, and I'm like, why does that look, I've shot that rig before, that camera, that lens combo in better situations, and it didn't look like a movie. So what do you think are some of those things?
It's really, that's a magical term. It's like, what makes something look cinematic, and I'm trying to explore this on every project, especially when you want to mix up techniques, because that's what I'm saying. I don't want to repeat, right? You don't want to repeat the same camera lenses and work. For some people, they find something and then they hold on to it and do the same thing over and over, but until it then is outdated, right? That kind of filmmaking. I think it's a subjective point of view. You have, like, we're not objectively showing how the room looks, the face looks, the lighting looks. Everything is, may I say, designed, or the way, like, right when we pick lenses and tune lenses, the way they fall off, and again, going against the obvious, like, lens designers, right, want to make stuff perfect and even and sharp and flat and neutral. And I always think, like, when neutral is, what is this in art? This is like the depth of art. You don't want to be neutral. You want to be warm or cool. You want to be soft, or you got to be one way or the other to make a point. Like, right, in neutral scene is like, why do you watch this? You want to feel
gray is not the most interesting color.
Absolutely. But a lot has to do with lighting. And that's, there's people try to teach lighting, right? Like with three-point lighting and this and that, or it's such an instinct. Like, I always can tell sometimes on a film set, you have never, no matter how big the film is or the show, you never have enough time, right? Never enough time, you never have enough budget. That never changes. So you have to make decisions very quickly. Sometimes on the bigger ones, you have even less time because of like a big movie star coming and to certain times they're available. And or like in the case of Constellation, we had like this wire rigs on the ISS, so it was very uncomfortable and tough for the actors to be in those wires. So you would put them in there, 2 takes, get them out of there, and move on or shoot something else. So I knew we had to be spot on, and that's why with lighting sometimes you cannot prepare for every scenario, and you don't know in advance how the actor will really move in that situation. So that's why it's so important to have like demo board control. Everything is basically controlled by computer, right? And like with a microphone, I can whisper to my gaffer or board operator. And my wife's actually a board operator, so sometimes we get to work together and quickly communicate and change stuff during the shot. That's the beauty of lighting. People consciously do not pay attention to lighting, right? Unless you eclipse the sun, then they like notice, oh, the light changed. But so you can be very bold. That's what I do all the time. Mid-shot, I adjust lighting to when I feel like it's not quite what it's supposed to be, or as the actor moves, or also just for dramatic effect to heighten the sensation. And I know you can go quite far before people pick up on that.
Interesting.
That's why I got to be intuitive. And so usually the lighting, but I know what you're talking about. Like if you can get the same camera, the same lens, and it might look very different. Sure, there's also the color treatment, what you do in color timing or a show light. And
that's the reason I said without color is because I think that is actually the answer. Is like certain, when you've got your Sonnenfeld or your Jill Bogdanovich or whatever, like they've got something up here that they
but
know.
Even there, right? You might think, oh, that's a given. But then you look at there's some projects you see like, wait a second, this is done by that big colorist and he had all the toys in the world, but still it feels very video-ish sometimes, you know what I mean? Like or some stuff like it. And it's not a given. Things were easier when we were all shooting film. You had a certain film look, right, for free, so to say. Right now in digital, it's we have many benefits, but out of the box, most digital cameras look very boring, right? Like they don't look filming. So it takes quite and I think it helped being that generation, right? Like you probably too. We grew up in a time where most people were shooting film, but we work with video cameras. How do you make that video camera look filmic?
Yeah. Those lettuce lens adapters are like the Red Rock. Yeah. Those are dark times.
Yeah, dark times, I'm glad.
With the thing was this long and you lost like 4 stops of light to the adapter.
Yeah. Oh boy. That's why it's such exciting times. Like in our case, we shot Red V Raptor 1600 ASA in the dark.
That's a great camera.
And super compact, compressed raw. And like you can just, like I say, an actor is in the middle of a scene and it's quite intense and you feel like, oh, I'm on a 50, my lens is not tight enough. And you don't want to like cut and swap a lens and stop the flow. Like now you can like switch on that Vista Vision sensor, you switch from whatever 8K to 6K. You have a tighter crop, you still have plenty of resolution, nobody will be able to notice, but you have a tighter lens virtually. I use this all the time to keep the energy up. And like, that's what I mean with being invisible with technology. Like there's a lot you can do, but don't just, there's so many, I always say like there's a million problems on a film set. Like there's so many moving parts. Don't add your 500 problems or make it visible for everybody, right? Try to solve it. And then of course you have to communicate if there's a thing you cannot solve. But if everybody tries to manage their things and keep a very quiet, focused set, I think that's so important. Like for cast and for me, myself too, in the director, you have to make decisions so quickly and you have only one choice, one chance. And then you committed to film forever, right? Like if you make a poor choice like this, backlight here, turn it on or off, and you decide, okay, let's keep it on. It's going to be like that forever. It's always a bit of pressure. That's why I think it's so important to have a focused, quiet film set.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like, I think, I can't remember who, I think probably Fincher said it, but like how everyone goes to the movies to see the actors, not your light, not not the production designer, even though production designers are rad, so important, but like no one's going to see it necessarily besides other nerds. And so if you can create an environment where the actors get to remain actors, that's the move.
I want to say though, that's the interesting thing with regular audiences who are not experts in lighting and direction and everything, I think within you watch a trailer or something, within a couple of shots, people can pick up if something, even you can have the biggest name actor, something looks, cheap or because like I said, the magic ingredient is missing, right? But it does not look cinematic. I think you can spend a lot of money on a big project, get big actors and amazing sets. But if I was still I feel the regular audience pick up on this, and I see it on my family sometimes when I watch something with them, like if there's some of the big masters, right? When they shoot something, you see 1 or 2 frames and you feel at ease that there's a story being told and you're in great hands. Like there's people who craft something who know what they're doing, or it just puts you at ease to watch it.
Yeah.
And that's not a given. You would think with all the technology we have, I feel like the opposite is the case. If you don't watch out footage with all the post workflows of doing HDR and shooting digital and sharp lenses and stuff, I feel like if you don't manage on every stop and every intersection to go the right path, you end up with something very generic, digital looking.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's like what we were talking earlier about, where some DPs know where to put the camera. I think it also has to do with that's the Conrad Hall thing, right? Just one. There's only one bulb because that's how it is, and we don't need to modify that.
Yeah.
Shooting reality sometimes can look worse, but if you can just put a little spin on it, sometimes it looks perfect.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to do, right? How do you find something that's unique? There's so many shows out there and movies out there. That's what I thought. When I was inspired seeing the Northern Lights and talked with Michelle, our director, and she also had this great idea to connect, that we see the Northern Lights from space and that connects Earth and space, and to find a color scheme or a look that works. Especially there's so many different episodes and it's different cinematographers, different directors, different locations. How do you find something that look at the Matrix, you see one shot of the Matrix and you feel such a classic. You feel it was a bit green, right? But you could immediately tell, wow, this is the Matrix. If you pull off the visual language that's so unique that you can immediately identify, I think it's kind of important, especially then for a TV show that maybe has several seasons and lives on. If you create visually a universe, and I always ask myself too, what is that, right? How can we, because locations will change, faces, the cast will change over time. Right. You have to find something with the camera, lensing and lighting that makes it unique.
Were you able to use your lens database for pre-production on this show, or had it not been come out yet?
Yeah, no, I actually started this 10 years ago when...
Oh, geez.
Yeah, never-ending story. In film school, I had to do one technical project to get my degree, and with a couple of friends, I just finished my first feature film, it's a post-apocalyptic film called Hell. And the German English film, Hell means bright. And it's so bright, the sun is so bright that you can't go outside anymore without protecting your skin. And that's where that movie, I did so many tests with lens flares and how to create a sensation of heat and sun. So I thought I'll do something with lens flares. And then that's when it started with motion control. But then in recent years, I think especially during lockdown and COVID and last year with this strike, we really reshot everything in large format, and so it's the same camera, the same motion control system. And so every time I discuss lenses with a director, I use it because lensing is such a subtle thing at first glance, right? It's hard to put your finger on what it is. It does have a big influence, in my opinion, right? When you see something on a big screen, especially how is the out of focus area rendered and stuff. So I always use this to first iteration for myself to select a couple lenses. Say these 4 or 5 lenses, I think I respond to subconsciously for some reason for this project. I save them now in Cineflex. You can save your favorites in a gallery and download a PDF and stuff. And then I go to rental house and test those 3-4 lenses specifically for the project, because I believe you cannot generically test for every scenario, right?
Right.
That's where just the flare, and then you test like, oh, for Constellation, we're going to have like this blue hour, or we have like candlelight, like the whole opening scene in that cabin is all lit with candles and fire, and there's no electricity. You test something specific to this, how does those lenses react, and then discuss obviously with your director and creative collaborators and find the right thing. But my first stop is, in fact, I browse, and by flare, that's what this is so important to understand. Like, people think of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek and crazy flares, but the flare is just that a fingerprint shows you what's going on. Like, is there lots of elements, and crazy, is it very moderate? And so, like, when I see this flare, I see there's something interesting happening that's not distracting. Sometimes I say, oh, this lens might be distracting by its character, right? And then I find out, I explore this one lens more. And now it's like a never-ending story because there's so many lenses coming out. It's like testing new lenses and work with programmers. Another programmers have a great team. They help me get to feature them. Super curious to hear feedback, and that's why we also go to NAB and like hear people what they think of it and how to use it. And because I made it basically as a tool for myself. Like, how would because I feel like that's the thing with when you talk to the director, like say you show a close-up or a test shot or something, like how do they understand how this will react in a certain situation, right? Like, it's so abstract, but with that Cineflare, you immediately see, and we're working on there's a cool update coming that you can choose scenarios to preview how it would look like in that scenario. It's like super crazy because the shot is motion control. You can like stuff. Yeah, so you can preview. They select you a scene, like, so show me this in a desert day exterior or in a night exterior or interior, and then it will show you preview how it would look like. And then for visual effects, it's super important. Like, Constellation, we had like, I think, incredible visual effects team, and we were obviously pushing hard because we built real sets, like even the exterior of the ISS. Like, people sometimes think that's all CG, but we had full-size modules. We don't have the space to attach them all together. That's modules. Sometimes the one thing I call the sprite cans, like this big silver thing. It's like the size of a truck or a train cart, right? And then we have our actors in a full spacesuit on wires floating in a pitch black environment. And I had just one single light source as a sunlight, and you get real flares, you get it in camera. Of course, the effects team did amazing work to extend it, but we used real visors. That's something that...
that's a choice. That's hard.
That's a choice, right? Usually the effects they say like no visors, they don't want to deal with camera reflection and stuff. But I did some research, and like the real spacesuit, we had this incredible team they specialized in building spacesuits for films and television, and they're very like super experts. They did look so intricate, like one-to-one, like the real deal. It's big and heavy and quite extensive, but the real spacesuit has 3 layers. The real visor has 3 layers of glass for redundancy and protection, right? As they would hit any space debris or something like that. And when you look at most TV shows or films, they have no visor, and they put in CG one single reflection. And if you look at Constellation, you will feel like Numi is going along the truss, and you see the real environment reflecting in triple layer, and you see the dust and scratches. And I feel that all adds up, that you hopefully are more engaged in what she's going through.
Yeah. It's so, I think, undervalued, especially with VFX, like the idea that the costumes and the set design not only inform the character, but like how you're supposed to feel, like you were saying, like that feeling of being at ease. Like if all that blends together and matches the character, then you don't think about it, and you're more willing to just buy into the script, as it were.
Yeah, it's so important. Like I said, like to find the magic collaborators, right, where everything clicks, and which is tough because as filmmakers, right, we were like nomads. We work on different shows, and it's like in the last years, I rarely worked on the same continent back to back twice. Usually, right, like I'm based in LA, but then Constellation was based out of Berlin, and then we went to Finland, Morocco, and my next project I go to the other end of the world. So how to find collaborators. And luckily with Andy Nichols, our production designer, I had worked with before on Red Notice, and we had a great shorthand, and you know each other and sensibilities, and you can early on in pre-production, you have to make some choices very early on, right? Like what do you build physically, what is maybe impractical, and you need visual effects help and to make those decisions, and with the director, and in this case also our stunt coordinator, Martin Boris, he did an amazing job, and he's very uniquely, he's also the special effects supervisor. Usually that's different people doing this, but he has a big team, like he has special effects people, but he's the mind behind it. So when he comes up with a stunt, he doesn't just have, let's say, the accident on the ISS. He doesn't have just the actors bumping into stunt mat in the mat. He plans exactly where to put an air motor to blow up debris as it hits. This all goes hand in hand, and like there's this depressurization, right, where there's physical like CO2 stuff floating, and 45 there's this fire scene with like real CO2, and obviously it's interactive lighting. We couldn't set on fire for real, and then zero gravity flames behave very differently. But that collaboration between stunts, special effects, cinematography, lighting, costumes, visual effects, and obviously the actors, that they have to sell it, right? And again, talking about magic tricks, like we in that scene where they trying to put out the fire, and like Numi's propelling herself with a fire extinguisher.
Right.
One. I know how intricate the CO2 looks. Like I said, we have to use the real deal. It doesn't cost the world. It's just CO2. It's sprayed. It interacts with the real environment and the light and everything. But the problem was then the fire extinguisher was really heavy because it was really metal. You couldn't use a dummy or something. So Numi had to almost like puppeteer and make the fire extinguisher feel super light and gentle while hanging in a wire rig, delivering your lines and doing all the stunt work. It was quite incredible what our actors pulled off.
Yeah, that's athleticism.
Yeah, that's a great workout. And sometimes, right, with wire work it's really tough and also impractical. Sometimes it takes a very long time to set up. So we were always looking for ways to, again, coming back to like a magician's background, the best magic trick is that you constantly change your technique, right? If you do something twice in a row, people might be able to spot how you've done it. But with film, this is an illusion, right? We didn't go to space for real. We want to sell it. So we constantly mix that. There might be one wide shot on a wire rig. The next one, like, we had like amazing core strength. She's like an athlete. She trained like crazy for this and could balance. We did like, there's like special like medicine balls to sit on, or just floating, like standing in an awkward position and miming, performing. And then having Scott Kelly on set, who would be there, is a great resource and correct if you think like, hey, in this, like, what's the fun fact is in many sci-fi films and shows, you see people floating in like what's called a Superman pose.
Right.
Flying like this. But if you look at real astronauts, they don't fly like Superman. Scott Kelly almost said like we are Homo erectus, like Homo erectus. Like we are upright, we're trained to be upright. So they float also upright. Even if there's no upside down in space, you want to keep for your head a sensation of where it's up and down, which is
right.
So you stand upright, you push up, and you float forwards like this. So we try. There's a couple of in the accident where we had a couple Superman moments naturally, but that's something hopefully audiences can pick up, that this feels more familiar and.
Yeah. Well, and they use they're constantly bouncing off the walls and stuff, because if you get stuck, you can't like swim your way to the side.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? It's terrifying. That could really happen in a big space.
Yeah, you got to wait for a buddy to come by.
Michelle is such a brilliant director, and she was always pointing out how important it is to educate the audience on this. Like we all might think we know how zero gravity works, but especially if you do show performance emotions, you want to be close. You can't show full body all the time. So to not forget that they're floating, and how they're always showing feet, how they're bracing or pushing themselves off is so important. And that sometimes in like the filmmaking process, you know how it is sometimes you have to cut down scenes to hit a certain runtime, or for the scene. And then these shots are easy to throw out because when people might think, oh, it's like not an important line or something, but to fight for this and because sometimes a small, even like a little insert, right, can become so important. Like Christopher Nolan says, like everything ends up big on the screen. Like it's not just an important line, like it's cinema and television too. It's like nowadays it's like cinema on I have an amazing OLED screen. Like you can have the best home cinema experience by watching some of those shows. And the technology came so far with streaming, right, in HDR. The quality is so good, that you really have to like artistically fight for these important beats, but you feel are important, right?
Yeah, I'm still a big Blu-ray guy. So it's wild. I've always said this, like it's wild how much, not clearer necessarily, but just for the sake of speed, like clearer the discs still are. Like a 4K Blu-ray is like the 4K of Alien is nuts.
Wow. I've never seen 4K Blu-ray, only the regular Blu-ray. That's already
that's incredible.
Right, even a 1080p Blu-ray where you can see the film grain. And I remember when I was younger and like a new camera came out and I knew this film was shot on that camera. I wanted to buy the Blu-ray to really see the texture and like, or certain film stocks, how they react, right, with streaming. That's the thing, it's a cool thing with HDR, like some filmmakers don't like it, some are really embracing it. And we did HDR early on, like from like, I think Independence Day Resurgence was the first time I did HDR on every project. But you always be in this world where there's HDR, but there's also SDR, and the majority of people still see SDR. Right? How do you deal creatively with that? And Constellation was actually the first time I really went for it. Like I said, like that's usually filmmaker, like cinematographers like to keep stuff dark and moody, and I thought this is really an opportunity because we wanted this to feel like contemporary, but filmic. Like, how do you make something filmic in a high contrast HDR world? Because film has great, like negative has a great latitude and dynamic range, but the film print has a fairly low contrast range.
Right.
You watch it projected, it's a dim image in a dark room. It only works because we are in a pitch black theater and our brain adjusts. And that's the beauty. What I think we associate of being cinematic is, I think that's the core of what photography is we're capturing a high dynamic range scene, like a bright sky, sunlight, compressing it on a picture, like a photo print is the best example, super low contrast. And it's like a painting to us. It's pleasing to watch. And what HDR brought in, suddenly we have bright highlights, like that creates that window to the world effect, right? Which is a whole different medium almost. Like it's not it's not capturing something on a medium. I feel like the medium becomes invisible. You create a window. And that's why like in Constellation, we try to find that sweet spot between that you still feel the medium, that you should still feel it's captured. It's not a VR experience. I'm there one-to-one documentary, but still go for a really bright highlight. Like there's this scene when the sun comes up in episode 1 and episode 2 where we really hit like the maximum 1,000 nits, which is fun. They can really blind an audience if they have a television that can show that. And then of course in other scenes you don't want to go that crazy because it would be distracting if your candlelight is like as bright as the sun. But there was an amazing colorist, Florian Woodsey Martin, and we worked for a long time on creating red show light and setting that up. But it's interesting too, like with film grain. I don't know, are you a grain connoisseur?
I suppose, yeah, it's certainly. I mean, I learned on 16 and stuff, and then it's always, like I said, with those, it's always fun to see, especially how older films look compared, like the older stocks look compared to 5219. Like 5247 is like my thing.
Right, Alien shot C-series anamorphic in film and dark and moody. That must look amazing in a 4K Blu-ray. I actually want to see that.
And they rescanned like the OG negative too, so it's like, well, they did that for the Blu-ray, but yeah, the 4K is like, I think it is an HDR like pass, so I think you really can use that OLED there.
Yeah, good. It's great. I did like I'm the biggest fan of the original Independence Day, and I was like crazy. Like one of my first big studio films was working on the sequel with Roland Emmerich.
That had to be fun.
And then during post-production, it was the 20-year anniversary was coming up for first Independence Day, and Carl Walter Lindenlaub, the cinematographer, was not available to supervise its role and asked me, can you supervise the remastering? And I felt like all this pressure because I've seen this film 200 times at least on VHS, in the theater, like in all medium, and on DVD and Blu-ray. And then you see the negative, it was 20 years old, like it was rescanned by photocam. And you could tell there's some, because it's old, some stuff deteriorated, but then also I've never seen it at 4K resolution.
Right.
Suddenly would see, oh, there's a little wire holding up that miniature plane, which you've never seen before.
Right.
But then also creatively, because there is no just one button you press and it looked like 20 years ago before with that film, like print film emulation or something that doesn't exist. So you have to creatively grade it, make it look like it used to look, but then also maybe refresh it. So that's why I'm very carefully watching when there's a remaster of something. I'm so nostalgic. And, there's nerd sites where you compare the different versions of Blu-rays. And
I use them all the time before buying. If that's how I decide if I want the 4K version. If I already have the Blu-ray, is I'll go to Blu-ray.com or whatever. And I'm like, there's one reviewer I know I don't listen to.
Because sometimes it doesn't get better, right? Or maybe it's sharper, but then like we talked about earlier, they go through a completely digital pipeline. It was shot on film, you digitize it, and there's no film print emulation simulated. So it does not look anymore like it used to look, and maybe people can say it's sharper now, but
right. Or sometimes, like recently, I've noticed sometimes they won't put the special features on like a newer disc. Yeah. So I'm like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep the old one, especially if the only difference is like, oh, this one's got Atmos and this one doesn't. Yeah. It's like, all right, well, I've only got a sound bar anyway. It's not, I don't know this nonsense.
What I find fascinating in the streaming age now, that this feels like it disappeared, right? The bonus stuff, like you'd think it's fairly simple to add on a streaming. I hope that's coming more, because as people want to know and are curious to see more.
There's less. Well, so two things. One, I've said a million times on this podcast that I want to create a special feature streamer because I bet the rights are not that expensive.
Yeah.
So you can be a partner in that.
Well, I'll be the first one to sign up. That sounds like a cool idea.
But also, I think commentary tracks should be easy to implement, right? English, German, commentary. Yeah. It's probably like 40 megabytes. It's not going to be a heavy load for Netflix or whoever, Yeah.
And you do like we do it now. You talk for 90 minutes and you sync it over. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
And it's such a testament for time. There's so many films and shows created every day now, but some will stand the test of time, and it's fascinating. Like, imagine there would be a proper commentary of Kubrick talking over his movie.
Right. There were a few, I know I got to let you go, but I remember there was a few Blu-rays where they would have, or like DVDs even, where they would have like the director like physically like walk into, do you remember these? Or they'd have like the enhanced edition?
For short amounts.
Yeah, those are fun. More of those. DVDs used to have such fun like menus, and they were really getting creative with that stuff. I miss it. I've kept you over time. Definitely got to let you go, but there's let's just meet up at NAB and we can just keep chatting, because there's a lot more stuff I'd love to pick your brain about, and
that would be fun.
I'll let you bring the Alien Blu-ray. You can borrow it.
Yeah. I'm so excited for it. Yeah, the movie coming, and that's after actually going back to quickly to round that up with Numi. Like, I'm such a big fan of the Alien franchise and of Prometheus. And I remember watching Prometheus in a theater. I know, but there was mixed reactions when it came out, but I loved it. And I'm still kind of traumatized by seeing it. And when I heard that Numi would be our lead, and she's so fantastic.
She's rad.
And as from an actress, her energy, but she has such an iconic face, as a filmmaker, cinematographer, to light her face and film it. She's unbelievable. And seeing her in a space thing, as a sci-fi fan, you got total Prometheus vibes sometimes. How it looks very different, and there's no aliens, I think. But who knows? Maybe if there's another season, it's revealed what's really behind the cowl.
I think now I have to just add it because I thought about it a lot, is when Prometheus came out, I think one of the biggest issues that people had was it was like one of the very first 4K projects, I think. And I don't think specifically I remember the makeup being incredibly visible. And I think it was just an issue of people who had only worked on film now working on a high def thing and not realizing how much you could see.
Yeah.
So it kind of, it didn't hit that magic place you were talking about where it all goes away. It was brought to the front.
Yeah.
And that was my only real complaint. I actually love that film. And what was the sequel? Covenant? I love that shit.
In Covenant, yeah. I think Prometheus specifically, like the way, like Darius Wolski, like is genius, like how he lit that. And it was actually, I think it was shot on a Red Dragon or something. Like,
really?
The time again when you say like people like, oh, you can pick up that same camera and it's shot on a spherical lens, like, and why does my work not look like this, right? It's a great example. Like, this is such a world building.
Guy.
Wow. Yeah. Another genius.
I just pulled that because I saw you had mentioned that you looked up to him and shit. And I was like, do you have the book?
I don't have it, no.
Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah.
It's half French though.
Is he talking about Alien 4?
No, it's all of, let's see, it's Seven, James Gray. He talks about a bunch of his films. It's like a bunch of interviews, and they're half in French, half in English. So the book is actually twice as big as it should be. But there's like good photos and stuff in here. It's not that expensive. They went out of print for a while, but he just talks about his influences and projects he worked on, and it gets kind of technical. Like I just opened it up. He's talking about ENR, like 40% ENR, which, the bleach bypass thing. But like you, Seven for me was like one of those movies where I was like, damn, this is a movie.
This is a movie, right? This is timeless visual, right? They're talking of texture, right? Like, and I don't know if there's a restored version or an HDR version of it, but
there is not. I think Fincher is allergic to re-releasing stuff, but I think I read somewhere that like he was gonna maybe redo that, because like even like Panic Room you can only get on DVD.
Interesting. Yeah.
I know Fight Club got a 25th anniversary release, but yeah.
Because that's so interesting to see that shift too, right? From like the Seven is such as the texture of film, and today like it's all shot digital, right? It's a very different aesthetic. I mean, filmmakers also evolve in their taste, and but it's interesting. Film sometimes forces you to, there's certain randomness or organic nature that, especially I think in this project, it made total sense, right? With the opening sequence and the scratches on the film and the tactile. There's still, I'm a kid of the digital age, right? I grew up, I shot film in film school, and I shot a couple projects on film, but and I love the look of film, like whatever the magic is, right? But I tend to shoot digital most of the time,
right?
But highly influenced by those rabbits. I think it's so important, like that we have labs around and still people shooting film to have that reference. That something feels so cinematic, right? And I think it's not just a generational thing. I think for younger, hopefully, I mean, some people think, oh, there's a filter on this. And no, this was shot on film. There's not a filter on that image.
Right.
That's, I think, really fascinating. Like the tools we choose and how you bend it. Some people shoot film because they like the look of film and that's it, right? But I feel it also has something nostalgic, which might be not appropriate, like in the sense of Constellation. I think it would. I like to embrace the modern high-res 8K anamorphic, like the pairing of anamorphic lenses and high sensor and stuff. But then trying to bend it in, like it's highly influenced by like a filmic color palette and that's
that was something I talked to Eigel Burled about the holdovers, and he was like, we wanted the film look, but when we shot film, modern film stocks are made to be scanned.
Yeah.
So they didn't look like film. They looked like the film looked like digital, so they just shot digital and made it look the way they wanted, And I thought that was interesting because I figured they just shot on film because that one's a good one. Good. We'll leave it there. I had another thought, and then I was like, no, we should. Sure. You got things to do. I got things to do. But let's definitely link up at NAB, and then we'll keep it going. Thanks so much for spending the time with me, man. That's a lot. Cool. This show looks fucking sick too. And I'm not even like a scary show person, but like that is a good one.
I have to say, I enjoy watching, right, when you work on a project, you know the script and everything that's happening. But actually, when it came out, I enjoyed actually watching it myself, because it's so, even if I knew what happened here and there, it's so twisted sometimes. And if you don't pay attention, you might like miss something. And especially when you know what's going on, going back and rewatching, especially 1 and 2, where there's so many Easter eggs, like what people might think is a slight continuity error, but it's actually switching between realities very early on before the audience knows it's going to happen. There's so much fun stuff to discover. So hopefully, because it lives on a streamer, people are going to rewatch it again and see what's going on.
Yeah, I hope so too. All right.
Well, thanks so much, Kenny.
Yeah, I'll hit you up. I'll email you about this weekend.
Perfect.
All right, later, buddy.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can go to frameandrefpod.com and follow the link to buy me a coffee. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.